I think I mentioned to you in the beginning, I exercise to like blow off steam, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. But one of the people I love to follow is a guy named Dave Kellogg, and he has a saying which totally resonated with me, which is, you know, like models and frameworks are important, but you don't want to use them as tools of oppression.
Kenny, welcome to LeadTail TV. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Let me say hi to all of your fans.
Well, thank you. And why don't I just want to jump right in and talk
Sure.
to you. We were looking at your LinkedIn profile and I was excited about doing this interview with you because you work for so many big enterprises and enterprise companies. I know you have so much to share and, we have so little time. So we're going to get right into it. You've worked
Sure.
for Adobe, Twitter, and Zendesk to name a few. What about Seismic attracted you to make the move from companies that large or
Yeah.
even
So
just like them?
yeah. So just I've been in marketing for, gosh, over 25 years. And, I've got this background in probably three core areas of marketing. Got a background in, integrated campaign and field and demand generation. So just working, working with sales teams in the field, trying to hit a number. And I spent about 7 to 8 years doing that when I first started my career at Adobe. After a while, you get tired of being told what number to hit. So you want to ask and say, how did you get these numbers? Like why these quota targets, or why these live verticals, and why are we going after them? And at Adobe, you actually go into product marketing to actually ask and answer those questions. And so I made this switch. And so I'm from Toronto, Canada originally. I'm a Canadian. I moved down to California after 8 years of being in the field in Toronto in a satellite office. And I moved down to California where I really built up my second leg of marketing discipline, which is around product marketing. So I learned all of the things around like classic product marketing, like who's your audience, personas, TAM, customer journeys, all that stuff. And I did that for about 7, 8 years. And then I moved on to my third leg, which was more around like integrated demand generation and also like modern demand gen is what I would say. So that's when I had left, gone to a couple of startups to basically, really quantify marketing's value to the business, look at MarTech because it was a growing field at that time, and just really understand like how do you measure all parts of your funnel. And so in all of those jobs, and I promise I'll answer your question, is that all of those jobs required me to work closely with sales, right? So as a marketer, I was either building campaigns or, building product marketing assets for my sales teams. And I always saw this dynamic, right? Marketing would always say, hey, look, we've got all this content, assets, plays, enablement tools. Sales would always say, hold on, where is it? Can't find it anywhere. And that's just been something that's been a part of that marketing sales dynamic for a long time. And when I discovered Seismic, they actually had a solution to solve that. So I thought, okay, I've got to come work with this company because, several different reasons. They have, the number one leading solution for driving basically modern sales enablement. The second thing that was important to me was working with people that I love working with. And just, in my career, I've been fortunate to have a good network of people. And there was great people at Seismic that I wanted to work with again on. And then the third thing was probably the opportunity to do progressive marketing. Being a company where they value good marketing, they understand the relationship between marketing and sales. This is what the company's actively trying to solve for. And so all three of those just hit the mark with Seismic.
It warms my heart to see you get to work with a company who does the thing that you actually get to use in the job that you do, which is really interesting. I'm curious because I know that KPIs are a big thing, like when you measure every inch of the funnel. So we know sales and marketing have to work together to get customers through the buyer's journey, but a lot of the KPIs tend to be adversarial. What do you think about the way that the departments are scoring themselves based on their models of success?
Yeah, that's a really it's a this is a good long conversation that I've been in many conversations where people talk about this ad nauseum, but one of the things that I see, and this has just been my observation, is that um, many companies they operate in silos, right? You've got typically in your supply chain of demand generation that turns into pipeline, that turns into like bookings deals and renewals. You've got a marketing organization, an inside sales organization, and then you have a sales organization, and also customer success and renewals as well. And often what I find, in terms of just the KPIs, is that every team has a different set of KPIs, right? So marketing might have a set of KPIs around MQLs or pipeline sources. The SDR or BDR teams might have a KPI around like, inbound or outbound, of goals and metrics. And then sales, they're on the hook for actual pipeline and also bookings. And one of the things that I've seen is that if you have very different goals for each, right, often what ends up happening is that no one is looking at the entire picture, right? Because often the way that goals and targets are set in companies is that they have these siloed goals. Marketing, you have a marketing pipeline target of X amount, $100 million. Inside sales, you've got a pipeline target of this amount. And then sales, you've got the actual pipeline and bookings goals. But what happens often, Brian, that I've seen is that there's a lot of details that get lost where marketing can, hit their pipeline goals in the quarter that they're meant to create their pipeline goals. So create $100 million of pipeline in Q4. But often what happens is that pipeline isn't immediately converted and closed in that same quarter, especially in B2B enterprise sales. So what I've seen a lot is marketing or inside sales saying, I hit my pipe targets, and then sales saying, wait a minute, I've got nothing in pipeline this quarter or next quarter when I need it. A lot of that is happening in future quarters out. And so teams have to get aligned, in my opinion, on pipeline when the sales teams need it in the quarter that they need it the most. And that's a bit of a different context. I'll give you one other little example that I've also seen. And, you mentioned that I've been at a lot of different companies. I've seen this in large and small companies, Brian. But often one thing that I've observed is each team, if they act in silos, they have these different success metrics that aren't actually aligned to what winning pipeline looks like. So just one example I'll give is that at one company I was at, marketing was, their metric of success was, hey, look, you've got to generate MQLs and pipeline, but we're going to use a very popular third-party tool that will measure levels of intent. And anything that's like a high level of intent is an MQL that should get passed to a inside salesperson. You talk to the head of the inside sales teams, and if you ask them and said, well, how are you measuring your success and your handoff to a salesperson? They'll say, well, we're following a BANT methodology, or budget authority need timing, and that's what we qualify. And then when you ask the sales teams, how do you measure what winning pipeline, or you measure pipeline to booking success? They'll say, well, we're on MEDPIC. So I thought, wow, you've got marketing saying you're gold on this, inside sales gold on this, and salespeople looking at their business or qualifying pipeline from a different set of parameters. And my big thing was, this makes no sense, because each team would say, I'm doing my job, but the conversions weren't happening. And just what I've seen work the best is when every team is aligned to that one standard. So if you're using, for example, MEDPIC as an example, right, then all the teams should be contributing to that MEDPIC score. In other words, what I say, Brian, is I want my sales pipeline born on second or third base. So if we can agree with inside sales, let's qualify like half or 3/4 of what that seller would have had to qualify anyways to make it into a stage 1 or stage 2 pipe. You'll start seeing a lot more alignment, a lot more efficient pipe, a lot more, deals that don't fall out or get stalled out, because it's mapped to what a salesperson would normally qualify, in their stage one pipeline, as an example. I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. There's so much disjointment. You think we'd be farther along at this point where everybody could just get along, but no, they have so much that they have to do individually as silos to get their goals achieved. I'm curious. You kind of talked over this. I'd like to dig in a little bit more, if it's okay, into how you get alignment, or how do you get to alignment if you can't get to it all the time? What's the closest we can get to, and what does that process even look like to say?
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many models. It's like, which one do we choose, and then how do we get them there? Like, once everybody's bought in, if that's even a possibility.
Totally. I think it takes. There's a saying that I tell people when I'm first going through this journey and evaluating, the health of a company's funnel, is that, first of all, I look at every team, I look at what their definitions of success are, and I'll say, well, like, what does a handoff look like when marketing hands off something to an inside sales team? Is there a standard definition or a minimum viable MQL product, right? Or an MQA, a marketing qualified account definition? And do your inside sales teams agree to that? Have they actually contributed to saying, look, I'm your wingman. If you can bring me these kinds of conversations all day long, I'll take those, right? Versus everyone has a different definition, right? I'll do the same thing from inside sales to salespeople. I'll say, well, what does a great handoff look like? Is it, in some companies I've seen, I like my BDR or SDR, and I know they get paid on this, so I'll just take it because I want to do that person a solid. Well, that doesn't help anybody out. You want to know almost like, what is the standard strike zone for like every player, no matter what, right? And that's what you're trying to get towards. So I'll start off having that conversation. And then what I'll look at and see is, does the data validate that, those feedback points? So part of this is actually data hygiene, right? Are the sales teams good at tagging and bagging things in Salesforce so that every stage one looks like a stage one? Because if it's different, that creates challenges, right? Marketing, are you creating MQLs and leads that, come from low value channels, as an example, like content syndication or other things, but drives a lot of volume, but poor conversions. So you want to look at all those things. And what I ultimately try to build out, Brian, is a set of stages in handoffs with clear definitions of what those stage handoffs look like, that you could actually pull through data like Salesforce or, a marketing automation system. And that way you can start tracking every team, every individual's batting averages, right? You can see how your conversions are yielding because everything should more or less look the same, or at least in categories of similar buckets. And once you have that, then you can start to determine where things have a lower conversion rate than others. So I just call it systems of like clarity. Every team is responsible and accountable for what they need to deliver, right? And also I say a lot of transparency, because if marketing's, top of funnel isn't converting, hey, it's a team problem, right? So how do you be transparent about it? And the last thing in the whole process is a lot of empathy, right? Because the worst thing you want to say is, hey, look, I'm delivering to you a consistent MQL product, or the SDRs or BDRs are saying, I'm delivering a consistent handoff and it's not converting into a stage one opportunity, or it's being pushed off to the side, or it's not being looked at for now like 30 days, right? Like, you have to have a lot of empathy across all of that to see what's working and what's not. But you can build out as close to as what I think is a fully closed loop model. And it's just learning, right? Like, if you see a lot of rejections happening, you want to understand the rejection reasons why, so that you can keep improving. Everyone keeps ghosting us, or that first call was great. It was, in stage one, but then we lost it because now the customer went dark on us, right? Or look, we know that pricing is an issue. Well, how do we take pricing or urgency or whatever those reasons are for rejection across the whole journey, into a systematic way to be able to address and fix that. So I think if you can get to that model, which sounds simple, Brian, but like you said earlier, you'd be amazed at how few companies really align together to hack that through. And it's a challenge. It really is a challenge.
Man, that is so challenging. I mean, what you just said, well, you made it sound, the steps and the simplicity of what you just said, and yet we're dealing with people, and people can sometimes, be a little harder than we imagine. I would love to dive in a little bit on attribution, which we're kind of dancing around, on how to pay attribution to the right thing. It's been a hot topic in marketing circles for a long time. Sometimes it's captured. Sometimes the pixels make it hard to even capture the right attribution, and then we circle back, and now all of a sudden technology allows us to do it again. What do you think is attribution? What is attribution to you, first and foremost, and how do you think marketing teams should be using it?
Yeah, I think attribution is one of the last uncharted territories in marketing. And I say that with the context of, like, there are companies out there that are trying to do a good job, in my opinion, of like tracking and measuring things. But some companies, I mean, obviously, like at my company, we use Visible today, and we do a pretty good job of tracking all of our different touch points. But then how do you apply the right model? Whether you apply like waiting on the first touch or the last touch, or you go through, a W touch model, like there's a lot of different models one could deploy. And also, I think a lot depends on what are you selling? Who do you sell to? Like, how do your buyers discover, learn, try, evaluate, or buy, right? Because if it's just you, Brian, making that decision, then I would probably argue and say, like, hey, you've got more of a single channel, single decision maker, single player mode. Like, the number of touch points might be important, but you're the sole decider of like what gets acquired. And that's a pretty, you can apply a certain funnel or attribution model that says, I'm going to track all of Brian's touch points. Like, first touch is really important, so paid is going to be really important, and then we'll divide it out, and I'll do a 30-day look back because my product is only $100 and it should be a fast decision. That is a different attribution model than if you're selling $100,000 enterprise software that is ahead of market maturity, and you've got to get 5 or 6 people on board, right? Does first touch really matter? Does last touch really matter? That junior person in the room in the back who's furiously scribbling notes, they might be the influencer, right? Because they're actually gathering all that information. Like, how do you suss that out in all of the things that you're doing? And so I kind of, I'm going to steal a line. As I told, I think I mentioned to you in the beginning, I exercise to like blow off steam. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, but one of the people I love to follow is a guy named Dave Kellogg, and he has a saying which totally resonated with me, which is, like, models and frameworks are important, but you don't want to use them as tools of oppression, right? And so I think of it as, yes, you want to measure things and look at things, but use attribution as an insights engine, not as a measurement yardstick. What I mean by that is I have been at companies where we do measure attribution, and we see that, people that attended an event or this event that we did in Q3, right? We saw this much pipeline, right? Or this converted to this many bookings. So guess what, webinar and events team? Next year, we're growing our business 30%. We're going to add 30% onto that attribution number you had. The events team is going, well, we don't know how we did that. We just did the event and it just shook out that way. And so, if they're gold on that, their only response then is to grab more people, get more names in the funnel, try to do more of a reach strategy. And that starts to unravel at the seams. And so, I kind of think of it as, what does attribution tell you in terms of when people are in their learning phase, what are they doing? Are they going on search? Are they using events and webinars as a learning vehicle versus a late stage decisioning vehicle, right? And so all those things are really important to measure, and attribution is one way to measure that. But I think you've got to apply the right attribution model to the right motion of your business. And I think regularly I just see that there's a disconnect with that. And then there's this, well, paid drove this much, or this channel drove this much. So let's stop doing the other stuff and do more of that stuff. And then I will say, wow, putting my product marketing hat on, you think about it as, I didn't know that my target persona only learns or discovers or makes decisions through that channel. And that's not how it works. So, I think that's where I'm just seeing that you've got to figure out what attribution model works and then use that as a baseline for insights and then keep refining. The one other thing I will say, just to add on to that, Brian, is all of this stuff works if you don't have a good sense of your personas, your target audiences, your ideal customer profile. And a lot of companies probably don't invest enough time looking at basically buyer personas and customer journeys. And I mean, this is controversial because I think I've heard both sides, where some will say, well, customer journeys, it's that one point in time, you did it last year, big study, but the customer has changed. And I get that as well. But, I've also seen the model work where you do the research and you do understand actually what, how your buyer discover, learns, tries, and buys. And then you try to map your marketing activities or other activities to that. And so, I did this one project when I was at a company called Lithium, and we brought on board a really great consultant who helped us map out that buyer journey. And candidly, we discovered that third-party analyst reviews weren't as important as peer-driven reviews, especially because we had a solution in the market that was ahead of market maturity. So it was still an early space. And so it was peers talking to other peers about whether or not our solution was good. Well, we wouldn't have known that if we didn't have that customer journey mapping done. And the last thing I'll point out is that often a brand will think that they are the ones that would they're in the middle of helping walk people through that journey, when in many cases, the customer or prospect might be on your channels or on your domain or off your domain to get that information. So you're not always the intermediary of giving that information. They want to go to other sources, other sites, other people. So this is also why branding is important, is my point. So
that's awesome. Oh my God. You are a wealth of, you're your own data model. I mean, it's just like, there's so much that could be, taken away from that conversation, and we can go down so many different avenues. And it begs the question for me. I mean, being somebody who, I wrote a book called Human to Human, because at the end of the day, it's all about the human on the other end. There's no B2B or B2C, it's H to H. And so what I'm curious about is the human aspect of everything that you just said, because, there's a customer on the end. And I know that this is part of what you guys do, which is the right message with the right person. And you said empathy, which was totally like, that calls to me. And how do you create more empathy and more human moments in the midst of all of what you just said?
Yeah, it's really hard. Like, I'm going to tell you, just being in marketing for this long, it's a marathon, and I just feel like I'm always learning. And I think every good marketer has a sense of insecurity because, what worked for you in one company doesn't actually work in another company because things change, or the market change, your competition has changed, your buyer's preferences, have changed. And so, I think for me, what I try to do is really just listen and work across all of my stakeholders and teams, and listen to your customers. Like, there is really cool, good tech out there now that allows you to listen to your sales team's conversations. You can get a lot out of your customer advocacy groups, and there's a lot of lines of communication to tap into to understand what they're thinking and how they're feeling. One thing that I've definitely seen, and Brian, you probably relate to this as well, is that people don't like being sold to, right? it's all about, how do you actually get permission to engage, permission to solve, right, people's problems. And when I think about just like my own journey for buying Martech, I don't really like answering calls from, SDRs or just like cold calls. I really hope that there's some reason why they actually called me, right? Like I was doing some research, I was doing something. There's something that's contextually relevant. And where I'm going with this is that, people are a lot more empowered now to make their own decisions because they're doing all this research on their own, right? Like we all know that, and there's a common adage of like a lot of sellers are being pushed down the buyer's journey or the sales funnel. I think Gartner had this stat of like I'm going to get this wrong, but like sellers are only involved in now 15% of the time engaging with a person who's thinking about buying something because they're doing all this upfront research. So what I think about is how do I make sure that I'm always giving the people that are interested in my category the right information, whether it's, hey, look, I've got a point of view in the market that I want to tell you about, and here's why I'd like you to see the world the way that we see the world, right? Or drink our Kool-Aid, right? But if you believe that, then let me help you, right? But I also fully understand that this is on your terms and your time. And now I want my sellers to be super educated about, hey, look, I've seen your situation. I know what you're going through. Let me hold your hand and walk you through this process because we've helped people like you out. That's a different conversation than like, hey, like, so can I put you on for Q2 to close one? Or, it's just a different dynamic, right? You're trying to figure out how do you be trusted, helpful, and relevant and just help people along that journey. And I think if you're doing a good job, that customer or that prospect will realize that, hey, like you can help them out and solve your problems. And so that's probably just how I try to think about it from like the human to human side. As just, I mean, we can go down several angles here because there's also a lot of other motivations and other nuances that I've learned over the years, selling kind of like tech software.
Oh yeah, all of this, everything that we've talked about, I feel like we could have another 2 hours on, and
Oh,
and I'm trying to pull the which is you're doing phenomenal. I'm gonna hit you with the question, which is like we're gonna close on, which is the hardest question I'm gonna serve you today.
uh-oh.
Are you ready?
Yeah. I'm
Okay,
nervous
so
now.
on Twitter, you share great views of the Bay Area. What's the best spot to catch a sunset of the Bay?
Oh my God. I'll tell you a hike that we just did this weekend. So it was full moon this weekend on Sunday. Sunday was full moon, and you can actually hike up the Marin Headlands and hike up to the top of there's a hilltop view that when you go there at sunset, you can see the sunset in the Pacific Ocean on one side, and then you look to your left and you've got this view like of the moon starting to like crest up over kind of like Mount Diablo, like to that side, like over Oakland. So you see the sun setting and the moon rising with the Golden Gate Bridge right in front of you, and you've got this like panoramic view of the bay. I'd say that's probably my favorite hike right now, but it's timely and bring a jacket because it gets super windy.
You that sounds phenomenal. How do I follow you on Twitter? Just curiously, now
At
that, or
Kenny
how does everybody
KH,
follow you?
well, at Kenny KH Lee at Twitter or at Kenny KH Lee is my Twitter handle.
All
So
right, so there we go. You just got a new follower, if not more, out there. And thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your data with us here today on Lead Tail. I really appreciate it.
awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated talking to you, Brian.
Thank you.